Chapter 11, Areas of Polygons. Today we're going to cover Section 11.3, Areas of Trapezoids. Our objective for today will be to know and use the formula for the area of a trapezoid. Theorem 11.5, the area of a trapezoid equals half the product of the height and the sum of the bases. And I tend to not remember the formula A equals 1/2 times the height times base 1 plus base 2. Here's how I tend to remember the formula. I always relate things back to rectangles. Imagine if I made a rectangle and I used base 1 for the rectangle. Well, if I found the area for this rectangle, it would be too big because I'd be finding this extra pieces off to the side. So that rectangle wouldn't work because it's too big. Likewise, if I used the other base for a rectangle, I would get a rectangle that's this size, and I notice that that rectangle isn't big enough because I'm missing pieces. I'm actually missing this extra information right here. So base 1 on the bottom was too big. Base 2 on the top was too small. So I really need a base that's right in the middle of those two. Well, how do you get a number that's in the middle? You add them up and divide by 2. So I'm really just looking for not base 1, not base 2, but the average of the bases. And the average of the bases happens to be this segment that is halfway between them, sort of connecting the midpoints, which is called the median. So I just think one base is too big, the second base is too small. I don't want those, I just want the average. And if you look over to the side here, that's all this part of the formula is. It's finding the average of the bases. Base 1 plus base 2 times 1/2 is getting the average base. So I tend to think of this area formula as sort of like a rectangle. The area is just base times height, but I remember that the base, one of them's too big, one of them's too small, so I need the average. So I need the average of the bases times the height, or if you didn't want to think of the base, you could call it the median. So it's the median times the height. So that way it's a little bit easier for me to remember than trying to memorize the formula. Average of the bases times the height. So here's a sample problem that says find the area. So I tend to go not to the formula, but if I look at the bases, one base is 9, the other base is 4. One's too big, one's too small. So what's the average of 9 and 4? So I'm thinking, what's my median? Well, if I add them up, I get 13. And if I take 13 and divide it by 2, I could just leave it as 13 halves, or I could go to a mixed number if I wanted to. So my area is this average of the bases, 13 halves, times the height. And my height, I can see, is right here. My height is 4. And I'm going to think of it as over 1. 2 goes into 4 twice. So all I need to do is take 13 times 2, which is 26. And I know that the units on area are always squared, so this is going to be inches squared. The next one. Here I notice that it sort of looks like it's tipped. So if I look at my bases, there's one base here and the second base there. So I want the average of the bases. 28 is too big, 16 is too small. So I want the median or the average of them. So if you want, just think, well, how do you get the average? Add them up and divide by 2. So I can even grab my calculator and just type in 28 plus 16, divide that answer by 2, and you get that the average is 22. So now I'm taking my average base, 22, times the height, and in this case the height is right here, is 25. And now I need to take 22 times 25, so I can go back to my calculator again and just type in 22 times 25 and get that it's 550. And the units will be inches squared. Number 3, looking for my bases. I know the bases are always parallel to each other. So in this case, the bases are 5 and 7. And I know the average of 5 and 7 right down the middle here is going to be 6. So my area equals the average of the bases 6 times the height, and my height in this case is this piece right here, which is 7. And 6 times 7 is 42. And there aren't any units in the diagram, so I don't worry about any units in my final answer. Find the missing values. So when I look at this chart, here's what all the different pieces are representing. I know that all of these are dealing with a trapezoid. So I'm going to draw a generic trapezoid for something to look at. So B1 is referring to one of the bases. B2 refers to one of the other bases. H is representing my height. A is the area. And M is representing the median, which is just the average of my bases. So when I look at the chart, the first thing I tend to look for is, I know if I take the bases and add them up and divide by 2, I'm going to get the median. The second thing I look for is, I know that the area is just going to equal the median times the height. So looking at this very first one on the left, if I want to find the median, it's going to be the average of 10 and 16. So add them up and divide by 2. 26 divided by 2 is 13. I know that my area is median times height, so it's just going to be 13 times an 8. And if I take 13 times 8, I get 104. And notice there aren't units on any of these, so I don't have to worry about that. The next part, I don't know the base 1 and I don't know the median, so I can't work on that. So if they give me the area is 150 and the height is 10, if I divide, I can get the median. So 150 divided by 10 gives me that the median is 15. So now let's find base 1. Well, I know that the average of the bases has to be 15. So imagine if I call this value x. So I know some number plus 20 divided by 2 is going to have to average out to 15. Well, I can just cross multiply and get x plus 20 equals 30, subtract 20, and x equals 10. And hopefully that makes sense. The average of 10 and 20 would give you 15. Moving on to the next column. Always like to start with the bases. Base 1 I don't know, base 2 is 5, and the median is 11. So I know what they average out to. So I'm going to go through and do this pretty much the same way as the other one. So if I call this value x, I know that the average between x and 5, so I add them up and divide by 2, is going to have to be the median value, which is an 11. Well, if I cross multiply, I get x plus 5 equals 22. Subtract off 5, and x equals 17. So I've now found that my base is 17. Finding the height. Well, I know the area and I know the median. And I know that 11 times some number has to equal an area of 99. So 11 times 9 would give me 99. Next column. If I look over there, I'm missing one of the bases, but I'm also missing the median. So I'm going to look down and try to find the median value based on the area and the height. I know the area is the height times the median. So I'm just going to call this value m for the median. And I know that the median times the height, so median times a height of 7 is going to give me an area of 77 square roots of 2. Well, divide each side by 7, and you get that the median is 11 square roots of 2. Well, now that I know the median and I know base 1, I can try to figure out base 2. So if I just call this value y, I know if I find the average of the bases, so base 1, 4 square roots of 2, plus base 2, which I'm calling y, divided by 2, all has to equal the median, which is 11 square roots of 2. And cross multiply. So if I cross multiply, I get 4 square roots of 2 plus y equals 2 times 11 square roots of 2 is 22 square roots of 2. Subtract 4 square roots of 2 on each side, and I get y equals 22 square roots of 2 minus 4 square roots of 2 is 18 square roots of 2. Up to the last column then. So I start by looking for my bases. I'm missing one of my bases, but they do give me the value for the median. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I don't want to call the missing variable x this time because it's part of my answers. So I'm going to call the missing value just a. So let's find out the value. So I know if I average the bases, which would be a plus 17x divided by 2 equals my median, which is 11.5x. Cross multiply, and I get a plus 17x equals 2 times 11.5 is 23x. Subtract off 17x, and you get 6x. And the only thing left to do is to find the area, and I know that the area is just the median times the height. So finding the median times the height is just nothing more than taking 11.5x and multiplying it by the height of 12x. And I know x times x is x squared, so the only thing left is what's 11.5 multiplied by 12, and it's 138. The next two, let's try to find the area of this trapezoid. So the big thing here is I really need to find what's the height. So how can I find the height in here? Well, I know if base 1 is 12 and the base on the top is 6, and this is an isosceles trapezoid, that the bases of each of these triangles has to be the same, and they're both going to have to be 3. That way I know the 2 3's and the top of 6 adds up to a total of 12. So what's the height of one of these triangles? Well, I can do Pythagorean theorem, 3 squared plus h squared equals 5 squared, or I notice that it's a Pythagorean triple, 3, 4, 5, so the height is 4. So now for my final answer. I know the area of the trapezoid is the average of the bases. So looking at the average of the bases, what's the average of 12 and 6? Well, the average of 12 and 6, my median, that would be going right down the middle. Add them up and divide by 2. So add them up is 18 divided by 2 is 9. So my average of the bases is 9 times a height of 4 gives me an area of 36, and there aren't any units, so it's just 36. Next problem, similar type of thing. If I look at what I need the bases and I need the height. And I don't have the base on the top or the height, but I do notice that I have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So in my 30, 60, 90 triangle, if I go from 8 to the short side, I know that it's going to be 4, and the same thing's happening over on the other side, so that piece is also 4. I know the top middle is a 12, so I already know that the entire top up here is 12 plus 4 plus 4, which is 20. So now I know my bases. What's the height? Well, in the 30, 60, 90 triangle, when I go from the short side of 4 to the height, it just gets bigger by the square root of 3. So it's 4 square roots of 3. So my final answer then is the area equals the average of the bases. Well, the average of the bases is the average of a 20 and a 12. And the average of a 20 and a 12, which is really finding my median. Add them up and divide by 2. Add them up is 32, half of that is 16. So my average base is 16 times my height of 4 square roots of 3. So all I can do is multiply the 16 times the 4, which is 64, and the square root of 3 isn't going to change.